It's 10,000 years ago, and you've just done something no human has ever done. You've stored a whole winter of grain in a pit beneath your hut, enough to keep your family alive until spring. For the first time in your life, you sleep easy. But in the dark, something is already eating it. Mice. Hundreds of them, breeding faster than you can kill them, turning your survival into dust. You're about to lose everything, unless something out there decides to move in and help. Let's start with what was actually new here. For almost the entire human story, you didn't store food. You found it, you ate it, you moved on. There was nothing to protect because there was nothing to keep. Then, around 10,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent, that changed. Humans planted seeds, waited, harvested, and for the first time held more food than they could eat in a day. They put the extra in pits, in baskets, in sealed jars. They had invented the surplus. And the surplus changed everything. It meant you could survive a bad winter. It meant you could feed people who weren't out hunting. Toolmakers, builders, leaders. The granary was the first bank. The first insurance policy. The first promise that tomorrow was taken care of. But here's the problem with a giant pile of food. You're not the only one who wants it. The moment humans gathered grain in one place, they sent an invitation to the most successful freeloader in history. The rodent. Mice and rats had always existed at the edges of the human world, but farming gave them paradise, endless food, warm shelter, and no reason to ever leave. One species in particular, the house mouse, stopped living in the wild entirely and tied its whole existence to ours. Where we stored grain, it moved in. And it bred like nothing you've ever seen. A few mice in autumn became a swarm by spring. They ate the seed you needed to plant next year. They fouled what they didn't eat, coating the stores in droppings until the grain rotted or made you sick. A single infestation could erase an entire year of work in a season. This was a new way to die. Not from a predator's teeth, but from quiet little mouths in the dark. Scientists can actually trace the birth of farming by following the mouse. Wherever early humans in the Near East started gathering and storing grain, the bones of the house mouse show up right beside them. The mouse didn't just live near the first farmers. It spread across the world on the back of agriculture, one granary at a time, like a shadow that civilization could never quite shake off. And here's the brutal part. So why didn't they just kill the mice? They tried, and it didn't work. You couldn't stop them. You were big, slow, and loud. They were small, fast, and everywhere. They came out at night when you couldn't see. They lived in the walls, in the floor, in the spaces too tight for your hands. Your traps were clumsy. You had no poison. Your dog was strong, but a dog crashing through a grain store does more damage than the mice. You had built the most important thing you owned, and you had no way to guard it. For thousands of years, the granary and the mouse were locked in a war the mouse was winning. Until something showed up that was built for exactly this fight. So what was it? It came on its own. And nobody went out and captured the cat. There was no moment where a clever farmer decided to train a predator. The African wildcat, the small striped ancestor of every house cat alive today, simply followed the food. The settlements were crawling with rodents. And to a wildcat, a village was the richest hunting ground on Earth, so it crept in at the edges. The cats that could tolerate being near people ate the best and raised the most kittens. The skittish ones starved at the margins. Generation after generation, the cat tamed itself. Not for us, but because the calmest cats got the most mice. We didn't domesticate the cat. The cat looked at our garbage, our rats, and our fire, and decided we were worth living next to. That's the part people miss. The relationship started as a deal. The cat got an all-you-can-eat buffet. We got a silent, tireless guard that hunted the one enemy we couldn't reach, in the dark, in the walls, for free. Picture that granary at night now. The mice come out like they always do, and this time, something is waiting. Low against the wall, silent, eyes catching the last of the firelight. It doesn't chase the swarm. It waits, picks one, and is gone before the others even understand what happened. Night after night, it thins them out. Not in a single dramatic battle, but in a slow, patient war the cat was perfectly built to win. Now, To be fair, the cat wasn't the only thing standing between farmers and starvation. People built better granaries, used dogs and weasels and even snakes, and learned to store smarter. The cat wasn't a magic solution, but it was the one defense that installed itself, worked in the tightest spaces, cost nothing to keep, and never left. The first farmers didn't hire the cat. The cat applied for the job, did it better than anything else could, and simply moved in. We know how early this bond formed because of a grave. On the island of Cyprus, archaeologists uncovered a burial about 9,500 years old. A human laid to rest with care, and just beside them, deliberately placed a cat. Cyprus had no native cats. Somebody had carried that animal across open water by boat, which means it mattered enough to bring along on a sea voyage at the very dawn of farming. The cat wasn't food, it wasn't livestock, it was already something else. A companion worth protecting the surplus that protected you. But here's where it gets bigger than one granary. The cat didn't just save a family's winter. It protected the entire idea that civilization is built on. Think about the chain. Stored grain let populations grow. Growing populations needed even more stored grain. More grain meant more rodents, which meant the threat scaled up exactly as the stakes did. Every city, every empire, every full warehouse was a target the size of its own success. And quietly guarding all of it was an animal nobody paid, nobody trained, and nobody could control. When humans started sailing the seas to trade, they brought cats aboard to guard the cargo. And that's how the cat conquered the planet, riding in the holds of ships, following grain to every coastline on Earth. By the time we get to Egypt, the math was obvious to everyone. Cats had become sacred. Harming one could cost you your life. They were painted on walls, wrapped as mummies by the hundreds of thousands, and mourned like family. People sometimes laugh at how seriously the Egyptians took their cats. But the Egyptians were a grain civilization. Their wealth, their power, their survival sat in warehouses full of wheat. The animal that kept the rats out of that wheat wasn't being worshipped for being cute. It was being worshipped for being essential. And that's the strange, almost funny truth at the center of all this. Farming was a trap. The moment humans started storing grain, they chained themselves to it, to the work, the harvests, the endless labor of feeding more and more mouths. We domesticated the wheat, and in doing so, the wheat domesticated us. We gave up the freedom of the old world for a pile of food we then had to defend with our lives. And the cat walked into that trap, took the food, ate the mice, and gave up nothing. It never agreed to the farming. It never signed up for the work. It just found the one good seat in the whole bargain and sat down in it. For 10,000 years, we've worked ourselves to exhaustion to keep the grain safe. The cat has kept the grain safe by doing exactly what it wanted to do anyway. We didn't save the cat. The cat let us believe we were in charge. It quietly made sure the world we built didn't rot in the ground beneath us.